cannot. You were part of the inspiration for this whole project
because
when I
when I
first
first
called
called
you,
you,
we talked for over an hour on the phone, and you had so many wonderful things to say that I definitely want to encourage you to speak up tonight and share a lot of your thoughts. And then the conversation I had with you and Daniel. You were part of the inspiration for this whole project because
when I first called you,
are you guys getting that too?
Yeah. It's coming all over the place.
Yeah. That I definitely want to encourage you to speak up tonight and share.
And it might be a bit of a delay. It's probably helpful if everyone mutes when they're not talking. I think
Okay.
that's what we might be getting.
it's vital.
Yeah.
You guys getting that too? Yeah. Coming all over the place.
Yeah.
Kerry, it's from your computer, so take a moment to check in your tabs and make sure you don't have this YouTube page open on one of your tabs.
Kerry, if you're a host, you can mute anybody who isn't muted.
Let's try this again. Yeah, I've muted everyone, and it seems like it's okay. If I need to, I can go get headphones. Maybe that will help. I'm not sure. I'm still hearing noise from someone, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. Let's try this again. It's like a 30-second delay. I've muted everyone, and it seems like it's okay. If I need to, I can go get headphones. Maybe that will help. I'm not sure.
Kerry, I think it is coming from a tab on your computer right now. Because we had gotten you logged into YouTube and our YouTube before, and I think it might be back on your YouTube.
Aha. Amy, I'm sorry, I wasn't understanding you earlier. I think I got it. Does that seem good?
I think we're good to go. Yay! We'll edit this part out later.
Oh, what a learning curve. All right, well, I'm wondering if there are people out there watching, and if you are, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in for this. I'm here tonight with members of the Army Chorus, past and present. Very pleased, and also the president of the Virginia chapter of the American Choral Directors Association, Amy Moyer, is with us, largely doing some troubleshooting and keeping me in line. Want to introduce, first of all, the current director of the United States Army Chorus, Major. Do I understand you're Lieutenant Colonel promotable, Daniel Tobin?
Yes, that's correct.
Congratulations! I'm delighted
Thanks.
to hear that. I remember your audition.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
It was, and you were good then, and I'm sure you're better now.
Thank you.
But thank you again for joining us tonight, and thank you again for your support in this little project, which I hope that this is going to be an ongoing discussion that I can kind of encourage within the larger male choral community. Also delighted to see my dear friend Master Sergeant Jason Gottschall, who I remember your audition. And you're now enlisted conductor and also one of the primary arrangers for the Army Chorus as well, aren't you?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Jay. And then David Zabel, one of the newest members of the Army Chorus. I think you've been in for about a year. Staff Sergeant Kyle Tomlin. Kyle, how long have you been in the chorus now?
Just hit 3 years.
Wow, that went by fast.
Yes.
And current or past conductor of the United States Army Chorus, Lieutenant Colonel retired John Clanton. Sir, good to see you.
Good to be here.
I appreciate you joining us. And then one of our most distinguished alumni, George Shirley. Uh, George, you're professor emeritus at University of Michigan.
Yeah, I retired in 2007, but they've asked me to continue to teach a small number of students every year, which I enjoy very much. It keeps whatever is left between my ears functional and also keeps me from dipping too deeply into the retirement funds, which I appreciate. But it's wonderful to be still able to interact with young singers, a couple of whom I see on the screen here that I've had the pleasure of encountering along the way. But this is great. This is a fabulous idea, and thank you for inviting my participation.
Delighted to join us. And then Alvi Powell, Alvi and I served together in the Army Chorus for I don't know how long, almost 20 years. Alvi, what have you been up to lately? You need to unmute yourself.
About now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I sing from time to time. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was at Shiloh Baptist Church and did a virtual in uniform honoring our veterans.
Oh, wonderful.
So I put the uniform on one more time yesterday.
When will that air?
It has already, and it's if you go to Shiloh Baptist Church website, I'm sure it's there. I was surprised I could still get in the uniform.
I haven't tried.
Just barely, however.
And John Cheek. John, delighted to see you tonight. So glad you could join us. John is up in Egremont, Massachusetts.
Thank you. It's great to be here with this wonderful group of folks here. Haven't seen George since we were teaching in Härnösand in northern Sweden a few years ago with a mutual friend of ours, Jean-Ronald Lafont, who has this school for young singers. And I got to watch George teach and and he sang some too. And man, and hear a bit of his story. George, of course, was before my time in the chorus, so it was really wonderful to get to know him during that time. And the most wonderful little anecdote, on my way to Newark Airport, we were listening to the Metropolitan Opera on Sirius, and there was George singing Simon Boccanegra. So it was wonderful to hear him. We talked about that, but yeah. Anyway, great to be here.
Well, I wanted to sit down with all you guys tonight. I was saying before we went live that, this is the ultimate question that I hope we can answer tonight, or at least shed some insight to, is how do we encourage men to sing? And then, leading into that, I want to talk about why it's important for men to sing and what is it that calls us to sing. I have my own ideas, certainly, about all these questions, but what I really want to hear from is all of you. And I came up with this concept in a conversation with Amy Moyer. And I wanted to start with the Army Chorus because you're the guys I know the best. I served 20 years in the chorus after serving 9 years in the Air Force singing sergeants. And there is definitely a brotherhood about being in this group, a brotherhood that extends a long period of time, and a brotherhood that transcends generations. We've all overlapped at some point. George, I'm going to start with you. You served from, remind me, 1956 to 1959, is that right? And even though decade separated us from our years of service, I've enjoyed getting to know you through the reunions and through your reputation, and then through the brief conversations that we've had when you've been passing through the DC area, and you performed at the Anna Presbyterian Church a couple of times when I was on staff there, and now getting to know you through Zoom. So Can you say a few words, George, about the beginnings of your career and how the Army Chorus? What was it about the chorus that sort of kind of hooked you and made you? Because you told me you had no plans to become an opera singer, but how did the Army Chorus kind of hook you in and then catapult you into the next phase of your career?
I was a very happy high school choral music teacher in Detroit. Started teaching in 1955. Planned to get married in August of 1956. And I got that letter in about April of 1956 saying, "You're going to get married to me. This is Uncle Sam." Well, I wasn't about to run off to Canada or something like that. I mean, the Korean War had ended a couple of years before I graduated, but the draft was still alive. And I heard about the chorus before I was drafted. The word had gone out because the chorus was being formed in early 1956, late 55. And every young guy who sang and was facing the draft made his way to Fort Myer, Virginia to audition for this new outfit. And I didn't go because the parent organization, the United States Army Band, founded in, I think, 1925 or 26 by General Pershing, had never had a black member. And this was in Virginia, Washington, D.C. in the 50s. I thought, man, there's no reason for me to even think about going because I've got no chance of a snowball in Hades of getting in. So I went into the Army as a bandsman. I played euphonium when I was in college. And I wound up at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, did my first weeks of training, came back as a member of the band. And after about 2 weeks of playing the flag up in the morning, playing for graduation cycles, this was Fort Leonard Wood is an engineering post, playing 8-ball, maybe playing a little concert somewhere on post, and then playing the flag down at night. I thought I would go out of my mind if I was going to spend 2 years doing that. So along with two of my band colleagues, we decided to go to Washington, Fort Myer, to audition. One was a trumpet player named Dave Anderson. Couldn't sing his way out of a paper bag, but he thought he would come along and audition for the band. The other fellow, Hardy Lieberg, had a nice tenor voice, good clarinetist, and he came. So we piled into a little 2-door Studebaker and got as far as Cincinnati, and we figured this ain't gonna happen. There's no space in here. So we put our money into flights to Washington, and we arrived at Washington that morning, went to the fort, and the captain at that time, Captain Samuel Loboda, who eventually became the chief honcho of the band. He heard my two colleagues sing, and he told them very politely, "Thank you very much, we won't be able to use you." And I thought, oh man. So I sang my audition and did the reading thing along with Ernie Murphy and 3 other fellows. And Captain Loboda said, "Would you wait a few minutes?" I said, "Yes, sir." So he went into the command room, and after about half hour, nothing had happened. I thought, yeah, well, it's the same old, yeah, right? Huh? Well, he came out, and he said, "Well, we've decided that we would like to have you join us if it's what you really want." And I said, "Sir, if it wasn't what I really wanted, I wouldn't have traveled all night to get here." And he sort of turned red. He said, "Yeah, you're right." So that was my entry into the chorus. It became, there were most of the guys are from the South. And some of them were a little distant. Others were welcoming, warming. And it became, over the 2 years that I was there, a real band of brothers. But I was looking to get out because I wanted to get back to my teaching position, My wife and I had gotten married a week before I was drafted. So our daughter was born at Walter Reed, and I was ready to get back. And so I wasn't thinking about a career. I was looking forward to a career as a music teacher. Jack Gillespie was one of the members of the chorus. Jack eventually sang operatically in Germany at Heidelberg and then came back and ran an extremely successful opera program at Texas Tech under the name of John Gillis. But Jack was studying with one of the private teachers in Washington, as were many of the guys in the chorus, keeping their skills up. And Jack was studying with an old fellow named Temi Georgi, was a tenor who had sung in Germany and in the United States early last century. And he was teaching privately in his home in Washington. And Jack kept pushing me, just kept bugging me. And so I finally, out of desperation, said, okay, I'll go over and sing for the old guy. And I sang for Georgie, and he looked at me and he said, you study with me 1 year, I guarantee you'll have a career. Well, I'd been singing, solos in college. I did my first opera at Wayne when I was a senior, because the Glee Club director wanted to do Oedipus Rex of Stravinsky. He said, take a look at the score, at the role of Oedipus. And I did, and we did it. It was a great experience, but it didn't say to me that this is going to be your life. I wasn't interested in that. So I thought about what Georgie said. He didn't look as though he needed the money from me. He could see who I was, and he had to know there weren't that many guys who looked like me singing operatically or singing classical music. So I thought to myself, gee, I don't want to go back to Detroit, spend 10 years teaching and then kick myself for not finding out whether this old guy knew something that I didn't know. So I signed up for an extra year to give myself a chance to find out what this old fellow was all about. And when I had joined the chorus was already a 3-year deal. And that was one of the other reasons I didn't want to join the chorus. But Captain Laboda did not insist that I sign up for the extra year. So when I signed up finally for the extra year, he was very happy about that. And so I launched into studying with Georgie, who was the first person I'd been studying voice for years, but he was the first person to give me an idea of what it was to be an opera singer. Just before I got out in 1959, I auditioned for the Met Auditions, the regionals in Washington. And I lost. I wanted to find out, about this thing, because I didn't know, but I knew Oedipus Rex. So I lost, and I went to the reception following, and I was standing there, and John Gutman, who was one of the assistant managers of the Met, who had been one of the judges, and Howard Hook, who was the head of the auditions, the national auditions, they came over to me, and Gutman said, we want you to know that we like what we heard you do. We don't think you're ready to go to New York City yet for the semifinals, but keep doing what you're doing. And that is what I needed to hear. And that's what I needed to take away from that experience. And that's the way it started. It was Jack Gillespie, who was I think Jack was born in Missouri, who was the reason why I've had a career. And he was one of those guys who, when I first joined the chorus, was welcoming. So it was, from my point of view, it was something that was already written. And I'll shut up in a minute, but the chorus, as you know, doesn't travel a lot. The Soldiers' Chorus does that. But in 1957, we took a trip to California to sing at an ROTC convention. And Captain Laboda put a concert up with the Denver Symphony at Red Rocks Amphitheater for the return trip. And we were in the Denver area for about 3 days. And so one day, I and 3 of my colleagues rented a car. We had time. One of the colleagues was the late R. Berberian, who took a degree in law from the University of Michigan, sang in the Glee Club, but was not a music student, wound up singing for 20 some years as a leading bass with the Metropolitan Opera. To my knowledge, never used his law degree. Go figure. So anyway, we took a car and drove off into the mountains. We went to the campus of University of Colorado. We wound up in Central City. Central City is an old gold mining town, a huge draw for tourists, and it has an opera house. And we were walking down the main drag, and Ara saw someone who he had been in law school with coming towards us. This fellow was the chief tour guide for the opera, and also the head usher for chief tour guide for the summer, and the head usher for the opera. So we wound up with 4 free tickets to see Rigoletto, with Frank Guerrera, who was one of the Met stalwarts, soprano named Joan Carroll, who was singing successfully in Germany, and a tenor who sang with the New York City Opera. And I sat there that night. This was the first time I'd ever witnessed an opera as a member of the audience. John Crane was the tenor's name. And I sat there, and I've said this over and over again, it's the absolute truth. John was blowing the walls out of that theater. Della mia bella incognita borghese toccare il fin dell'avventure voglio. And I thought, gee, it's a good thing I never wanted to be an opera singer, because I couldn't do that all night long. Little did I realize that 4 years later, I would make my debut at the Metropolitan Opera with Frank Guerrera and Così fan tutte, and then 2 years after that, sing Alva in Alban Berg's Lulu, the American premiere of Lulu at Santa Fe. So I tell my students, you're here because you belong here. Your job is to do the work that you're given to do, and don't sweat what's going to come after, because you don't know what's going to come after. Have a dream, pursue it, do the work, and it'll be what it's written to be. Mm-hmm. So that's how the Army Chorus launched me in a direction that the only opera we heard in my house was Grand Ole Opry from Tennessee, with Minnie Pearl and all her good folks. But when I walked out on stage to make my debut with a little company in Woodstock, New York in 1959, I knew I was doing what I was born to do. It felt like I was home.
And you've had a long, illustrious career as a singer, and clearly you're still singing. We just heard a little bit.
Well, the last professional gig I had was last year, when the Detroit Symphony, the conductor, Slatkin, was planning to retire, and he wanted to do a concert performance of Turandot. Now, I won the Met audition singing Nessun Dorma, but last year I sang the Emperor Altum, which is much more the truth of where I am right now. I didn't sing it like Alessio De Paoli's Guasta sangue. I didn't do that. I used what I've still got, and it was a wonderful experience being a part of that performance with these younger singers who were blowing the walls out of the place.
Well, you are living proof that man can sing for a lifetime.
Well, my laryngeal pharyngeal reflux keeps me well moistened. Mm-hmm. My laryngologist said, well, it's sort of a curse and a blessing, because most people your age, their vocal folds are all dried out and bowed. He said, but you're in great shape. So the phlegm is unending, and it's a nuisance, but thank God I'm able at times to get it out of the way, so I don't get up and gargle and spit before the audience. I'm grateful for that.
Well, let me move on. John Cheek, remind me exactly the years that you were in the chorus. Was it 1969 to like 72?
Actually, it was 1971 to 1975.
Okay.
I also I extended for a year from the regular 3-year thing. I, like George, got an invitation from Uncle Sam about midway in my first year of graduate school at Manhattan School of Music, and I knew it was coming because I was in the first lottery, and my number was like 150 something. So I had a colleague there named Ray Harrell, a former member of the chorus, who told me about the chorus and said, "You got to go sing for Captain Kroll." So I went down to Washington and sang for Captain Kroll, and they took me, and I was able to finish the year, although not my degree, and I spent a lovely July and August at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and showed up to the chorus in September, and that was a really interesting time for me. I really developed my voice during that time. I think opened up my upper register, and I started having made my operatic debut with what was then called the Opera Society of Washington in the first one was Salome and Barbara of Seville. Barbara of Seville was double cast with a couple of newcomers, Maria Ewing and Frederica von Stade. And that was my introduction there, and I had some wonderful work with the late Norman Scribner with the Choral Arts Society, who helped me get management later. And in 1975, I moved to New York, and in the summer, in the middle of a garbage strike. I'll never forget my cab ride up to the Upper West Side with 12-foot high mounds of garbage. In midsummer, it was not a pleasant sight or smell. 2 years later, I was at the Met, which was insane. I did an audition when as I recall, I was actually I had a temperature, I had the flu or something, and I sang and for Levine, and they took me as kind of what was then the young artist kind of thing, and I made my debut on tour at Wolf Trap in the late May or early June, I can't remember, of 1977, in Il Trovatore with Cornell McNeil, Carlo Begonzi, and Renato Scotto, and with Levine conducting, and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm just a kid." But somehow I survived those early years and went on from there. So it was quite a journey. So the chorus did give me a time to develop from, say, 21 to 25. So that's a time, probably tough time for young singers. Not really quite ready to take on big responsibilities. So it was very useful for me, and we had some amazing experiences. That was, of course, during Watergate, and Nixon loved the chorus, and we went there often, and I inherited from James Johnson the solo, The Road to Mandalay, which Nixon requested every time we were there, including one time in which we weren't prepared for it. And the pianist, who was not our normal pianist, I think he was the pianist for the Army Blues, and we were going along, and we did not have Mandalay on the program, and a presidential aide came over and handed Captain Kroll a note which said the president would like to hear The Road to Mandalay. And of course, as Captain Kroll said, when your CNC gives you an order, you say, "Yes, sir." So he looked at it and said, "The Road to Mandalay," and the pianist said, "I don't have the music. I don't have the music." And so we did it archipelago with a dum 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 dum, and I went, "Holy moly!" and stepped out there and did my thing. One of many crazy memories I have from chorus.
I've never heard that story. That's a great story. And Alvi has a similar one. And Alvi Powell has one of the more interesting stories about being in the chorus. Alvi, you came in 1983, is that right?
Yes, and I was led there by George Shirley. Yes,
And you served for 10
mhm,
years, right? To 93.
yes, and left
And
and got out and basically toured most of Europe and some other parts of the world, singing the role of Porgy, and did a few other operas along with that along the way. And decided after that to come back. I thought maybe I was on my knees a little bit too much and wanted to make sure that I could walk at the age that I am now. So, came back to the course in 2001 and stayed another 16 years. Got out in 2017 as the oldest enlisted soldier in the United States Army. But the interesting thing about it is I first auditioned for the soldiers course over at Fort Meade. And they said, well, we'll let you know something. And went and told Mr. Shirley, who I was studying with at the time, what I had done. And he said, well, you went to the wrong one. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you should have gone to the one that I was in. And I had no idea that he was in the military at all at that time. And he said, I think there are one or two guys that are still there that I know. And so he called over and they said, well, we don't have any positions right now, but if you're sending someone, we're going to hear them or him. And so I went over and I sang, and they said, wait outside. And I waited, and they came out and said, congratulations, you're in. I said, I thought you didn't have any positions. They said, we just made one. And so that was my start, being in the Army course. But the interesting thing, I want to say this, and you'll probably get to it later. I really was not interested in singing in a male chorus. I didn't know anything about male choruses, didn't know what they sound like or anything, I knew I needed a job, and I was interested in singing in the mixed chorus. That's what I was used to, and I was a little disappointed that Fort Meade did not offer me a position until about a month later, after they had heard that the course took me, the Army course. That's a true story also. Anyway, but the thing that got me was after I went to basic, also at Fort Jackson, and came back in September also, was the first performance that I went to and actually heard the United States Army course, or male course, of course, was in Richmond, Virginia. And I sit there in my civilian clothes. I didn't even have a uniform. I just gotten out of basic, just reported in. And those guys walked out on stage. And this group of guys, some of them from the 50s, Dave Hudson, Joey Tribulco, Spencer Hay, they walked out. But it was the way they walked out before they even opened their mouths, and the way they stood. I noticed it. Okay. That got me right there. And I said, okay, these guys coming out like we're gonna show you something. And when they opened their mouths, I was hooked. That was the job for me. Never heard a sound like that in my life. So there you go.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is definitely one of the directions that I want to talk about. Maybe not tonight. I might talk about it in a future roundtable. But why should there be separate choruses, men's chorus versus women's chorus, and talk about the advantages of training the different genders. The other interesting thing to talk about too is that we're going into a whole new era. And for example, American Choral Directors has changed the name of the repertoire and resources from it's no longer women's chorus, repertoire and resources, and men's chorus. It's SA and TB, because we are going into a whole new era with transgender, and we want to be all inclusive. So this is a subject that I want to talk about in the future. But tonight I wanted to keep it more focused on the men's choral world and what we can do primarily to recruit more men to sing in general, not just in men's choruses, but in SATB choirs as well. And also to encourage those men who do go through the experience of transgender we want to encourage them to continue to sing through that process. So that is something that that the American Choral Directors Association is being very sensitive to, and wants to. We want to approach that topic head on. So, but moving on, we're already starting to run a little long, and I'm not surprised, because I kind of knew it would go this way. Colonel Clanton, can you say a few words? I started serving with you in 1998, but I met you in 1995, and you were a big reason why I made the decision to leave the Air Force and come sing for the Army Chorus. I'd gotten tired.
What did I do?
Well, I met Mike Malovic. Just a raise a glass to Mike Malovic tonight. Yeah. One of our dear friends departed recently. But I met Mike Malovic at an ACDA conference in 1995, and I told him that I was looking to get out of the Air Force, that I was kind of done with the traveling of it all, and was ready to just move on with my life and do something different. And he said, "Well, you really ought to consider the chorus, the Army chorus." And I was like, I'm not sure I want to keep doing the military thing. That was what it all boiled down to for me. And he said, "Well, you have to meet John Clanton, because we've got a really fine conductor at the helm right now." And so I did. I came over and I met you, and I sang for you and Mike and some of the guys, and got good feedback. And then when my enlistment was up in the Air Force, there was an opening, and I'm pretty sure it was Alvi's opening, wasn't it? Because Alvi had been out for a while, but that position had never gotten filled.
You're right.
I think we held it. I think that had stayed open for a while.
Yeah, but tell us what got you into not just singing, but let us know. Tell us what got you in front of the Army Chorus. Let's just start from there.
Well, timing.
Yeah.
The Army, when you're an officer in the Army, you don't have a whole lot to say about where you go. I was halfway through my career then. I'd been in about 10 or 11 years, and I'd taken some circuitous routes. I'd gotten out of the Army and came back in, was in Atlanta, and then had the chance to go to grad school. But before that, when I was in Atlanta, I sang with the Atlanta Symphony Chorus with Mr. Shaw for 4 years, which was a weekly master class in choral music. And then went from there to Eastman and got my grad degree. The Army sent me there. And then I was lucky enough from there to go straight to the Army band about the time that Colonel Lamb was finishing up his time with the Army Chorus. And they said, well, at the time, of course, it was a band program. I was one of the few people who had a choral background at the time. So they kind of said, well, if you're here and he's leaving, then you can take over the chorus. I was like, okay. So I had to overlap for a few months, and then stood up in front of that group. And it was, I'll tell you, if I had not had the previous experience I had with Mr. Shaw and the grad degree, I would have been totally intimidated by that group, because I'd done a lot of groups in the military, and you think you're with the best at each step along the way. Then you go to the next one and you're like, wow, I didn't know this was here. And then I remember my first week with the Army Chorus, I'd prepped myself, I'd done my score study, and I was like, I got enough to get me through the first week. And I go in, I remember I left the first rehearsal and went to the office and went, I just did everything that I thought I was going to do in the first week and the first day, because they were just that good. So for me, it was just timing and luck and the good Lord. But it was one of those moments where I stood on that podium, I think like one of the others said, and I knew that everything that had led me to that point had prepared me to be in front of the Army Chorus. And so it was just a match made in heaven for me, because not only musically, I'd never conducted a men's chorus. I'd done, some church work and this stuff, but that wasn't really a good representation of it. And then to stand up in front of this group was just stunning, not only musically, but it's just.
But you embraced the male choral repertoire, and you embraced that whole community too.
It was a special group of people, and it was a group and a type sound of music that I just absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And so I just relished it was one of those times we just relished every moment you had in front of it, and just, yeah, it was a blessing to be in front of that group. But it was timing is what got me there first, and then things went well, and I kept leaving and coming back. They talk about how much they like to have me there, but if they don't remember, they only like me 2 years at a time. And then I had to go away, and then they'd come back, and I'd go for 2 more years. They'd send me away again. So apparently I have a shelf life of about 2 years there. But it was a lot of fun. And Mike Malovic, you mentioned him, and I do have to say he was the sergeant major when I took over. And in the military world, sergeant major, of course, is the senior enlisted rank for people that don't know. And so he was the right hand, my right hand of the chorus. But basically, you know, truth be known, he ran the chorus. And but he was one of those senior NCOs that knew that his job was also to train this officer how to do my job without really letting me know that's what he was doing. And he was gracious and helpful and everything great that you can have. So.
And for people out there that are watching this, Mike Malovic recently passed away after battle with his liver cancer, wasn't it? But that's ultimately not what took his life. It was congestive heart failure.
Yeah.
At the tender age of 75, 76, you know, he's Mike was a mentor to a lot of us because he was a member of the Army Chorus for 35 years. If I'm not mistaken, he was the longest serving member of the Army Chorus. But anyway, so I think we're all still grieving that loss because it's only been a couple of months. But Major Toven, Lieutenant Colonel promotable Toven, tell us what led you to the chorus, because like I said, I remember you auditioning 18, 19 years ago, and it's only been in the last year that you've come to the chorus.
Well, it's I guess a case of the, you know, all good things come to those who wait. You know, it really is a dream come true. A somewhat similar background to John Clanton in the sense that you know, there was a lot of choral in my background. He was associated with Robert Shaw. I was a protege of Robert Page in Pittsburgh, and had that not unique, but that, I guess, a background that has served me well in the military, in the sense that I started life as a trombone player and did my undergraduate degree in trombone performance with a voice minor. And after I finished undergrad, ended up in the Pittsburgh area and was teaching at the high school and collegiate levels, and got associated with Robert Page and with the Pittsburgh Symphony Chorus, and sang in that chorus, and then eventually studied privately with Bob for a number of years. And like John had said, it was a weekly masterclass in singing, in repertoire, in how to create colors, how to you know, how to use those colors when in conjunction with instrumental background, which, you know, the Army Chorus often sings with the U.S. Army Band, and so, you know, how do we do that in a way that we can, you know, that the colors are right, the texture is right, that the balance is right, all of that, and so I learned just so much from working with Bob. And then went off to Eastman and did a degree in orchestral conducting. So, you know, I had a lot of band, then I had a lot of chorus, and then I had a little bit of orchestra, and had done some orchestral things along the way. But the point being that choral music really has been my first love. And I was fortunate that my first assignment was with the Soldiers Chorus, that terrible institution that for some reason did not take Alvi Powell. I can't believe they could make such a mistake, but spent a few years there, and then have been around the world, the Soldiers Chorus in Germany and a couple other assignments, and then was very, very fortunate to land here. And you know, one of the great things about this is, and Kerry, you touched on this, is, you know, with each of the different types of choral ensembles, whether it's mixed, whether it's high voice, whether it's low voice, you know, the colors that are possible with each of those groups, and that are unique to those groups. And that's why, you know, you're asking, why should we why should men sing? Why should we have, low voice groups? It's because it's a color that can be created that is like nothing else. And, actually, I think we've been talking a long time. This might be a great chance to listen to some music. Yeah, imagine that.
I'd love to share some of your music.
That's great. And so this first tune is a concert that the chorus did last January. Actually, the last live performance we did before the world changed. And this was a concert we did with with Jerry Blackstone, who is just one of the giants in choral music. And we brought him out for a week. He worked with us, and we did a concert at the end. And this is the Schubert song for men's chorus, Die Nacht. And it's, talking about the beautiful colors that one can create, here is a great example of what men's voices can do.
Beautiful. You know, one of the things that I've always appreciated about the chorus reunions is when people like George Shirley and John Cheek come back and they make comments about how nice it is to see the traditions of the chorus staying intact and being carried on to the next generation. So that was especially wonderful to hear, Major Tovin. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, and it's really nice to see you singing in the chorus too when a guest conductor comes in. Jerry Blackstone is he's a legend. I've never met him, but he is an absolute legend in the men's choral world. And delighted that you guys brought him in to do something like that.
I have to say he retired from the University of Michigan faculty.
Nice plug for Michigan. Yeah, I was going to say, Kyle, let's go to you next. That's a good segue to you. What led you to the chorus, Kyle?
Yeah, well, a little bit about my background with singing and stuff like that. I actually got started singing late. I didn't actually really start singing until high school and started with choirs. Didn't sing through the vocal break, and then decided to go, got bit by the music bug in high school, decided to go to college for music, got bit by the opera bug in college, decided to, follow it up with a master's degree at the University of Michigan, and then decided to, give the freelance career a shot. I was traveling around for, young artist programs, emerging artist programs for about 6 or 7 years, based in DC. While I was, traveling all over doing auditions in New York and stuff like that, I just happened to run into a lot of these guys around town gigging and, found out more about what the Army Chorus did, the community that it was. The guys encouraged me to audition, so I showed up to an audition, got offered the job, and then actually decided it wasn't the right time. So I turned down my first audition, went back out to the road for a little bit, and then hindsight being what it was, decided maybe I should give it another try and get back in touch with the guys. And, the rest is history. I'm here now singing with the group. Augmented my career with a couple of years in the Army Chorus.
And the chorus is better for having you. It really is. You brought the whole first tenor section alive when the day you walked in the door. It really was exciting to add your voice to the whole tapestry of the chorus. And Jason, I'll never forget approaching you at I think it was a Chorales concert that I saw you sitting in the audience, and I went up and said, hey, you know what? We have a second tenor opening in the chorus. I think you'd be a good fit. And I remember you kind of turned and looked at me like, are you talking to me?
That was funny. In fact, I think, Kerry, if I'm not mistaken, you had told me about an opening a little bit like Kyle. I heard about an opening from you, and my first response was, "What? The Army?" And I think I actually passed on that first opening, and there was a couple of years later when another opening came up, and by then I knew you a lot better and knew a number of the other gentlemen singing locally, and understood better what the job was from singing with many of you. And at that point, when you said there's another second tenor opening, I said, yes, please, and took that audition. And I hadn't ever expected to really sing professionally. My undergrad career started in engineering because I'm a nerd. And I got dragged by the music bug, almost kicking and screaming, into the music department at University of Delaware as an undergrad. Did a voice degree, having no idea what I would do with such a thing, but just knew that I could do nothing but sing everywhere. But went to grad school as a conducting major at Indiana, and thought that was my true path through music was conducting more than singing. In fact, there were several grad degree programs that I sang for who told me, maybe you should look into this conducting thing because I'm not sure you're going to make it as a singer. So that was what I had pursued was conducting. And so what I was doing in DC when I got to know you was operating as a church choir director and falling back on my technical skills to pay some of the bills doing computer programming work. But for me, that opportunity to sing with this ensemble kind of caught me out of left field, and ended up. I'm 18 years in now, and as you mentioned earlier, I'm now the enlisted conductor, which is sort of the associate to our officer in charge, as both a vocalist in the chorus and providing a second chair baton.
The backup conductor. I always call it the break glass if needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you do get to do a lot of conducting. And
well, that's what's been so funny about it is I took the job not ever expecting to use my conducting here, just
but
as
that's
a singer.
One of the reasons.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I first approached you, because I met you. I remember through Corrales, our friend Gretchen Corman, and I remember I saw you like warming up the chorus or something, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy, he's a fine conductor. And then I heard you sing. And I remember when I approached you thinking to myself, probably not saying this out loud, but thinking that you would be an excellent candidate for an enlisted conductor. And I was delighted that once you got in the chorus, you got on that track. I had no idea at the time that you could arrange.
Well, thanks for dragging me in. I didn't actually know much about arranging either. I just kind of made it up as I went along. So I got lucky.
Yeah, and did some great stuff. So.
And Kerry, I have to say that I think that's one of the things that we've seen. You listen to all of these different stories, and every one of us has weird and strange and unusual paths before and during and after our chorus experience. I think one of the beauties of being able to come through this system is the idea that it's a component of a career in so many different ways. And for some, it was a stepping stone to other amazing things. George and John going, off and doing amazing things. Alvi going off and doing amazing things elsewhere. And for others, like me, for example, realizing once we got here that this was a place that I could continue, that could be a full career for me. And I could do not only could I sing, not only could I conduct, I could arrange. And talking to some of our newer members, they're really discovering that the opportunity here is bigger than just a place to sing, but it's also that.
True. And like any career, and I think you'd all agree with this, it's kind of a patchwork. Being a musician is kind of a patchwork employment career. And even in the Army, our primary job was to make music. All of us gathered here tonight, even our conductors. Your primary job was to make music, but those of us in the enlisted ranks, we had to do other things. Like Jason, you worked in the library for a long time. I was doing a lot of the educational outreach stuff. I was also enlisted conductor. I was this base section leader. And some guys take other administrative jobs. And then the officers, I don't even want to get into what you guys have to do in terms of like overseeing the PA department or overseeing the library, or you guys, and then the things you'd have to do across the base. I mean, you'd have to be involved in other committees, right? Am I on target about that? I mean, it's even in the Army, it's a patchwork employment. We still, yes, we are paid full time to do music, but we still have to do other things. And that's I think that's true of all musicians. Yeah,
one of the things that I did to help to fill out the pay packet, as it were, I had 2 church jobs, but I guess my real high point was doing lead sheets for a fellow named Link Ray. I don't know if you know who Link Ray was. He was one of the early rock musicians, but country rock, and had a huge career. But he didn't read music, and somehow I was looking for a way to add to the coffers, and I put an ad in the paper. I do lead sheets, and he got in touch with me. So he went on to have a phenomenal career, and as a recording artist, as a performer. One of my last visits to Germany, when I was singing with Deutsche Oper, I was walking down the Kurfürstendamm, and there was a big sign outside of an emporium saying, "Link Ray and the Ray Men," and I thought, yeah, my man.
Well, David Zabo, you've been sitting there patiently for the last hour. So let's talk to you for just a second and tell us. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you through our mutual friend Ann Lee, and you participated in the Berkshire's High Peaks Music Festival this past summer with my wife Danielle and me, and it's just been a joy to get to know you and get to know your voice too. What led you to the chorus?
Well, I guess it all really boils down to like I want to make money singing, that somehow like that. And I mean, I have, yeah, it's pretty simple. And I kind of have a funny story. I was in a coaching with Louis Burkott, who is the director of Opera North in New Hampshire. And, I was a new, fresh little face. I was probably a freshman in college. And he said, so why do you want to do what you want to do? Why are you here? And I kind of just said, I want to make money, and he was, I think it wasn't that he was offended, or he was just sort of taken back by it. He's like, well, you're in the wrong profession if you want to just make money. And I said, well, no, you didn't understand. I want to do what I love and make money while I do it. Like, it's not about the money. It's so I can support a family and do what I love and just like swim in this pool of joy, and so he understood. And then he thought I had a good head on my shoulders. Like, I just want to do what I love, but how I came to know about this job, I was singing at a place called Camp of the Woods. It's just a wonderful place for, spiritual growth and musical growth. They have their own little music group, and I had played trumpet with the brass guys for pretty much the whole summer. And basically military choirs weren't even a thought. I had wanted to serve in the military in some capacity, I thought, but then music sort of just took off. Then my brother, before this Camp of the Woods, said, you do really well as a military musician. And I said, yeah, okay. And then I got to this camp, and all the brass players who I was really close with, they are all just waiting and looking and practicing for these military jobs to open up. So the more I hear them talk about the thing that my brother just introduced to me, the more I'm like, whoa, yeah, this is it. This is getting more enticing and enticing as I listen. My wife now was only my girlfriend back then, and she was military. What are you doing? Don't do that. Whatever, military. But then she, being very studious and meticulous, she started researching all the groups, and she found the groups that were most enticing to her. How could we make this work? So for a while we settled on the Navy band, but then we found Pershing's Own, and it just, with my classical background, that's pretty much what I specialized in since like 8th grade. I started on art song like everyone, but my grandmother was my first teacher. So, it all starts with family, and it's all for family, I just wanted job security. And man, the aha moment, there are two in the audition. Three of the people on this call probably recall it. My audition, that is. I was in the practice room, and I hear my two competitors. We're all in the same boat because we're all competing for the same position, and so we feel each other's pain and whatever. But nonetheless, my two competitors both had their masters, both just excellent singers. There's no doubt about it. I could hear them. They knew we all could hear each other. And so I just said, man, Lord, if this is the job for me, you've already written it. Like George has been saying, and actually like John said as well, like you just get that sense, like it's already, if it's meant to be, it's already written. So that sort of gave me peace. And the moment where I just was like so at home was when in the audition, got with the quartet. It was Adam Struby, McCarter, Ben Pattison, and myself. I had never sung in a male group before, ever. And what I heard was just pure bliss. Like what I was experiencing was pure bliss. I had never experienced anything like it. I was on the top, so I didn't have the luxury of hearing, the sound kind of encapsulate me. I was on the top. But even that was a special experience. I was being supported. I mean, I guess that's how it's designed, if you want to hear the tenor one, you're going to give me pieces that accent my part and yeah. So anyway, that moment was just, all bliss. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see myself leaving. I mean, to be fair, I did think I had more, I was more cut out for the military than I actually was. Basic training. Well, I thought I was more cut out for like the military side of things than I actually was. I mean, basic training showed me that, attention to detail is important, discipline important, all these things. But it's all just great growth. I mean, even including being in the tenor 1 section. If you put me in the tenor 2 section, I would have just been comfy, But being in the tenor 1 section, I had to grow. I had to adjust. There was no settling. There was no complacency. It was like, man, this is not fun for a second, because I have to learn how to navigate all this, and I'm still learning. And Kyle's been a great help throughout my process in every respect. But man, it's just, I'm newly married thanks to COVID, and so I'm living the dream as far as so I know some people don't like the military side of it, and some people, I love hearing all the different stories of how you got there, but I'm loving where I'm at right now. So that's it.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, this is for a singer, a military course job right now it's probably the safest place you can be. So a lot of people out there struggling right now, myself included. My performance career is at a dead stall right now, as Alvi's is too, I'm sure. But David, I want to go back to something you said, and this is sort of a segue into the next part of this conversation. You said it all begins with family, that you studied with your grandmother. She was your first voice teacher, and it all begins with family. And I suspect that all of us here gathered in this room tonight, we probably all had that family support going into music as a career. Am I wrong with anyone? I didn't think so. Yeah, I'll never forget my junior year of high school, approaching my parents and telling them that I wanted to be a music major in college, and my mother saying, "Well, you'll never get rich, but you'll never make a lot of money, but you'll get rich in other ways." And no truer words have ever been spoken. The money doesn't matter. And David, I liked what you said about just kind of wallowing in the joy of making music. That's what I felt throughout my lifetime, and I guess that might be one answer as to why men should be encouraged to sing. But what is it? The question I want to put out to the floor here is not what made you sing, but why is it that men sing? And George and Daniel and I talked about why it is that the whole human experience wants to sing. We talked a little bit about that, but I want to go right to the question: why do men sing? What is it about it for you? I have my own ideas again, but I want to hear from all of you, and just raise your hand or unmute yourself and start talking. That's fine.
Kerry, I'll jump in. Talking about making me remember that when I grew up on my dad's side of the family, he had two brothers, and then his father, and they were all singers from the church. And whenever we went to visit them, some portion of the trip always involved the four of them gathering around the piano and my mom playing and them singing gospel song. And so, I mean, I was raised in the church. Dad was a preacher. And so, I mean, I was around music all the time, but it's funny. That's a memory I've actually kind of just forgotten. But yeah, I mean, I grew up hearing that sound, and my dream was to get good enough to be able to someday play the piano for them while they sang. And but yeah, I mean, that's probably the only real background in men's music that I heard, though, because I think it's so funny that almost everyone here had never sung in a men's chorus when they got to the men's chorus. And it really is a rare animal now. And it's one of the best kept secrets anywhere, although we're kind of not make it so much of a secret anymore. So yeah, that was my background, was just hearing them gather around the piano and sing gospel songs.
So going back to family. Yeah. George?
I started singing with my parents when I was 4 years old. We formed a trio that sang in our church and in churches in and around Indianapolis. So I think I started singing in the womb. My mother had a lovely soprano voice. And singing is basic to being a human animal. I mean, it is the first sounds that we made. I think I said this before, when we were slapped on the behind and drawn into the outer world. The first sounds we made were and are arguably musical sounds. Sounds from that baby's little body that could be heard almost all over the hospital, right? Something went, there's a couple of books that I wanted to share titles with that I think you'd enjoy reading that deal with this whole thing about singing, human beings singing. One is called The Singing Neanderthals, published and written by a British archaeologist named Stephen Mython, Harvard University Press. He, in that book, wrote in rebuttal to a remark by Steven Pinker, a Canadian-American cognitive psychologist, that speech, that singing was an appendage of speech. And Mython said, no, it's the other way around. That speech is an appendage of singing. Again, singing came first. Again, if you listen to that baby, singing sounds. And we learn then the language of our people, and we still speak of speaking and singing and speech. They go together, but the singing came first. And when you hear someone sing something like the Rachmaninoff vocalise, it is something that comes from our need to express ourselves. It doesn't need words necessarily. It is essential to being human. The other book, written by Darlene Wiley, called The Timeless Muse, published by Inside View Press. I wrote a chapter in this. This is a series of essays on the human voice, on singing and spirituality. Just making noise is not what we do as human beings. Whenever we make a noise, it is to express something. That again is what the baby making sound is all about, expressing something. I tell my students, it's not enough just to stand up in front of an audience and sing pretty sounds. The people who are most successful as performers are those who sing from their solar plexus, the mind and the solar plexus. I ask my students, what is the solar plexus? Many of them don't know what it is. It's the place where all of the nerve endings come together in the center of the body, behind where your diaphragm is attached. And it's interesting because there is a nerve that comes from your solar plexus. It's called the vagus nerve, not Las Vegas, but vagus nerve. It wraps around your heart and is attached to your larynx. So this pathway between mind, solar plexus, heart, and voice, the sounds that come from that connection will make people sit up and take notice. So this desire to express oneself in that way, I mean, people who can't, quote, sing on a professional level, or can't carry a tune in a bucket, will make those kinds of sounds when they feel the need to express themselves. That's where the blues came from. That's where, people will moan and groan. It's essential. It is life force. Without that, a person who can't make sound is living in a place of frustration. They have to learn how to sign, they have to do this because they cannot express themselves with the native instrument. That connection between mind, soul, if you want to call the solar plexus that, heart, and throat. So hearing men sing, men sing. I mean, they sing all the time, but in this era where some people look at singing as not being macho enough, maybe, I don't know. But the Russian Army chorus, men's chorus, the United States Army chorus, there have been male choruses forever, and there will continue to be. It's just that today, a lot of children are not being educated in music in public schools, so they don't have that kind of education that I was fortunate to have. That led me to singing something from the Verdi Requiem in our school choir when we had a spring concert in high school, singing the first chorus, the solos in the first chorus from Verdi Requiem. That kind of training is no longer available as it used to be, and that's one of the things that we who love music and know the power of it as life force in our lives, we have to make sure that that is turned around so that children get the opportunity to begin to make music from the first grade on. When 9/11 hit and I saw members of Congress standing on the steps singing patriotic songs, I wanted to go up to those who had voted against the National Endowment for the Arts and say, why are you singing in this moment? What does that mean to you? Even though you're singing out of tune, what does it mean to you to stand here and groan and moan and trying to sing? If you can tell me the reason why you're doing that, then maybe you will begin to look at the power of music in people's lives and the power of music education and do everything in your power not to deny young children the opportunity of raising their voices in concert together in the class. Singing male choruses, there is a sound that comes from a male chorus that is distinctive. It is powerful. It is beautiful. There is a sound that comes from a women's chorus that has the same qualities, different timbre, different range, but it is the need for human beings to express themselves through the original language. You put babies in a room all together, they understand each other. They listen and they respond. It's only after we learn the language of our people, ich bin ein Berliner, ich weiß nicht, je ne sais pas, we can no longer understand each other. Maybe the next Congress, if they start to sing together, maybe we can get some things done, because singing and music are about harmony, they're about cooperation, they're about being on the same wavelength. So, e basta. Enough.
So anybody else have any thoughts on why men sing?
I had one thought that I wanted to add to that, getting off of George's, specifically the shared experience that he talks about, where we talk about, the community. I think that gets back to what David brought up too, when he said that music for him starts with the family and stuff like that. For me, I don't particularly have a very musical family, but music was the family that I chose. getting started in choir, and the friends in the community and the shared experience through making music together, I think was one of the things that drew me to that. You know, a lot of us have talked about that too. You know, Alvi, when he was like, heard the chorus and was like, I want to be a part of that. I think specifically for men, why we sing, I think the first thing that I come up for myself was, we sing because it's fun. We sing because it's something that we want to do. It brings joy to get to make music together, to find that cooperation, to get the wavelengths matching up to, you know, be that synergistic sound that resonates in a space. You know, there's a thing that calls to you from inside. I think that adds to that, and that having that fun and having it be, you know, the community and the family that you choose around you, I think is so important. All of it is so important.
Amen. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Kerry, I'd like to actually pick up on both what George and Kyle were saying. In terms of, you know, music being and singing in particular being this emotive form of communication. It's a way we express ourselves. You know, it's a natural and primal form of communicating on an emotional level. And then doing that in a corporate sense that Kyle was talking about. And there's research out there that shows that, particularly for men, that men, and young men in particular, are less and less able in our society today to bond and communicate on an emotional level with other men. And there's not to take too dark a turn, but there's seemingly maybe some connection between some of the violence that we're seeing in society and the fact that we're seeing this reluctance, you know, this inability for young men to be able to communicate on that level. And singing, you know, provides the opportunity to do that we come together and that we experience this, you know, we're communicating on an emotional level through music with other people, you know, and the bond that creates. And I think that's one important and vital way that we can maybe help fill that void that seems to be growing within the lives of our young men. You know, the good that, you know, even more so, the good that singing and the good that men singing can do for the world. I think the reasons just continue to grow.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something
Sure.
on that, if I can get my phone together here. You know, one of the things that I remember that I was never really pleased about, that I saw in the course that I was in, the Army course, was the way that, as I said in the beginning, the men came out on stage from the time they walked out and held their music and held themselves in certain positions that said, I'm here and I'm going to perform. Made a statement before they even opened their mouths. That was quite striking to me. Now, I say that because I think one of the things that we can do is invite young men to some of those concerts and show them what it is to stand and be a strong man with a strong voice, with a beautiful sound. And then they hear this sound. And I don't know how anybody can walk away from that, you know? And I remember so many times, and maybe you remember this, Kerry, that my thing would be how we walked out and how we bowed and that it was together. And I never felt that there was enough time put on. I just think that that's so important. You know, if you want to get young men to join, you have to set the example, not just in your singing. The singing is most important. We all know that. And the sound that the Army Course creates is one like I've never heard before. But they're also watching you standing there, every movement. And it's so important. And I thought that on the level that we performed on, meaning the places, it had to be perfect every time. And a lot of times it wasn't, unfortunately, but we got by. We got by. I received, I think, a lot of, negative feedback behind my pushing for that. But I just think that's important. I just do.
Well, setting an example for sure. Jason, you're uncharacteristically quiet.
Thanks, Kerry. You know me so well. I'm listening to all of this great conversation. And this kind of connects to what everyone has said so far. I guess the question for me isn't necessarily why do men sing, but more why don't men sing? I think
talk about that. Yeah.
I think when George talks about how it's part of humanity, it's there in us all. So if we're not doing it, maybe it's because we get discouraged from doing it. And I think I am really I am encouraged by a lot of what I'm seeing in especially in elementary music lately. In places where it's being supported, they're doing some amazing things. It's unfortunate that not everywhere is investing in getting kids, boys and girls, getting all kids just to make music with their bodies, make music with their voices, and to feel that joy that David talks about, that George talks about, I watch my sons. I have two elementary aged boys, and they sing all the time. It's not surprising because we make a lot of music in our house. But what I see from them isn't I'm singing to perform, but I see from them I'm singing because I feel it. I have a song in my head and it wants to come out of me. I have either a thought that means something to me, or a rhythm or a melody or something that I've made a connection with, and I can't help but put it back out into the world. And I think that investment in all of our children is so important. If they don't get that from their upbringing, if their home life doesn't provide them an environment in which that's supported and encouraged, what I love to see, and I'd love to see more of, and I'm sure ACDA at large is always supporting and encouraging that effort, is to just get kids to make the music. So the question is, when that does happen, what are the things pushing back against that? Mm-hmm. What are the things that tell kids that's not something that they should do, that they should stop trying to do it, or that they should be less interested in it? I mean, I think any number of us could speak to our experiences coming up through, again, public schools and our social situations and things. And there's often a stigma, right? There's often a stigma with making music as an activity. Like, everybody listens to music, right? I mean, that's something that no one will make fun of you because you listen to music, but they will make fun of you for trying to make music. And I think that's interesting. And I don't know why that is, but I think that's the one of the stigmas that boys in particular run into. I think, as George mentioned, there's sometimes that there's the conflict of the sense of masculinity or machismo or whatever it is. I'm not saying anything any of you don't already know. Well, those of us in this group or out there watching, that's not news. But what is it that we're doing to combat that attitude, to help all kids, and boys in particular, see the experience of making music, of using their bodies to make music, using their voices to make music, to see that experience as something that's that doesn't challenge their identity, right? I don't have answers. I just have lots of questions.
I think we all have lots of questions. The zeitgeist under which we live, in which we live today, where there's a lot of even more, I think, attention and focus on violence in society. Um, I look at something like boxing. Now they've got something called ultimate fighting, where there are no rules and you can just take somebody and beat them into with that kind of mindset. What we've seen in the past few months, the lack of sense of compassion, the sense of warmth in relationships. That we are in an era, a time, it seems, where violence. I mean, if you aren't walking around with an AK-47 strapped to your body, I mean, you know, what kind of power do you have? So the idea of men coming together to sing, I think that this, I go back to what Alvi said. I mean, the more one can get a sense of strength in that by the way the performance and the performers deliver what they do. That doesn't mean yell and scream, but the strength with which they carry themselves whenever they walk out on stage can say a lot. I, I remember when I was in Washington, when I was in the Army, the sound of the clicking of the heels of the soldiers who guard the tomb of the unknown soldier, when they snap those heels together, whack, like this. Now I could sort of think, well, maybe when the chorus walks out on stage, and when they snap to, that they can whoop, that would catch the attention of the audience big time. That would quiet whatever is going on, and then the music starts. So I mean, I'm all these years in show business. It makes me think, okay, what legitimate way can you grab the attention and have it absolutely there for you before you open your mouth? So it might be something to think about. The presentation is powerful, and the Army is all about power. The power with authority, dignity, boom, snap to, as they say, ho, whatever it is.
If I may, I want to speak to both what Jason had said and what George just said. I mean, we're all coming back to this idea that, you know, this idea of beauty, right? And we can't, in reference to the sound a men's chorus makes, we say, this sound is beautiful. I think this is an underdeveloped thought, Jason, but I think it gets to your question of like, why don't men sing? And I don't have kids, but I agree with you that it has to start in the home. If there's a fear of expression or creativity sowed in a child, right, then they're not going to want to be vulnerable. And these beautiful sounds that we keep talking about, this beauty that we keep talking about, it requires a certain amount of vulnerability, doesn't it? Right? You have to be, we as singers have to be willing to take on a certain amount of risk. But you know, just somebody who's not a performer, you know, who is ridiculed for creating music, you know, rather than being served by music at all times. I thought, even before you started talking about boxing, George, I tried in my mind to compare, like, okay, what other things do men do that can be beautiful? Is trying to kill, like, two elementary schoolers trying to kill each other on the playground beautiful? Is that beautiful? No, that's not beautiful at all. Two elementary schoolers singing together, that's beautiful. There's a certain amount of vulnerability and camaraderie, but yeah, like, I'm not saying there can't be beauty in boxing. Like, you can't appreciate the art and and the whatever. But when it comes down to it, I guess it's like the motivation of the heart. Are you trying to kill this person? Are you like trying to harm another human soul? Like, that's not beautiful. And there's a reason for that. We don't call that beautiful, but we do call an elementary schooler singing in the park beautiful, even if they can't sing at all. That's beautiful. But why is, I don't know. So yeah, it's vulnerable to create, it's vulnerable, to sing and to play music and all that stuff, I think.
And no one wants to be vulnerable. That's part of the problem. So even when we're armed to the teeth, we're still vulnerable.
I was going to come at that from like a little bit of a joke side and say, like, Jason, when you were saying, about making music versus about consuming music, and it was the first thing I thought of was like, oh, you're going to try something. You know what I mean? I feel like so much of society now, there's this idea that it's not cool to try unless it's good. You look at shows like reality TV shows, you have American Idol, the first couple rounds of American Idol, or America's, Got Talent or something like that, where you have acts that are there being vulnerable, but are there to be a joke, And I think society sees that, especially young men see that and say, oh, it's not cool to try. I'm just going to sit back and be passive and stuff like that. And I think being part of a community that can encourage that it's cool to try, that it's cool to do a thing, even if it doesn't attain a certain level, you are doing a thing and it's coming from a place inside you, and to celebrate that.
Athletics is all about being vulnerable. We look at football, we look at boxing, we look at all of these sports that young men go for. And it's all about trying. If I'm the running back, or if I'm going out to catch a pass, I've got to try for it. I can't be afraid to try for it. I can't be afraid that somebody's going to smack into me and smack me into the ground before I catch it or after I catch it. So finding some way of making, I know sometimes when I visit elementary schools, children today will say, oh, that's so hard. That's so hard. I say, well, yes, it's hard. There seems to be this mindset that is sort of pervasive now that, oh, gee whiz, it's so hard. I don't want to, as you say, I don't want to try because I don't want to fail. And nothing happens if you don't try and know that if you fail, it's only momentary. You can learn something from it, so the next time you try, maybe you will have made some progress and be successful. Nothing happens without trying. Nothing happens without failing. But there's this seeming mindset now that, oh, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to look like silly. I don't want to. It's so hard. Yes, I think we do a disservice to our children. We have to find a way of balancing it so that we let them know that it is hard. And because it is hard, if they try and fail and try again, it's a process of strengthening. There's a story that about the man who opens his door one day and there's this huge boulder in front of his door, and he looks at it. He can't get around it. So he says, God, why have you placed this boulder in front of my door? I can't. And God says, I want you to push against that boulder every day. Okay. So he pushes every day, pushes for a year, and nothing happens. And he says, finally, God, I've been pushing against this boulder every day and I can't move it. And God says, I didn't say you can move it. But do you realize how much stronger you've become by pushing against this boulder every day? And life is like that. We have boulders set in front of us. Sometimes we can't get around, so we have to keep pushing until maybe we can do something to get over it. That is life. There's no other way of looking at life. Some people have it a little easier, and we look at them and think it should be easy for us, but that's not the way it's laid out. We have to push against the boulders. And that's something I think that young people need to embrace. It is hard. No one sitting here has felt that it's been a breeze. And it won't be a breeze. There will be moments when we are on the crest and we move ahead, but then there's always a trough that comes after that. It's like the ocean. But the whole thing is always moving towards a shore. So we have to learn to accept the struggle, learn from it, grow from it, and move on.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Alvi.
Uh, over the years, the many schools that we performed, um, did any one of you have any student come back even years later and say, you know, I saw this male chorus or the Army chorus sing at my school, and I just was blown away. It was something I'll never forget. Has that ever happened to anybody?
Yeah, for me, yeah, it has many times.
Ah,
But I think you all know I'm teaching at George Mason now. I was brought onto the faculty in January of 2019, and then you all know I stepped out of the Army Chorus into full-time teaching with my home studio that Danielle and I jointly operate and performing. And so I'm in the circle. I'm constantly meeting people. I'm taking on new students. And I just had one of my college students. I've been working with him since August. He grew up in Loudoun County, and he was asking me about my career as a military musician, and he said, "So I just learned that you were in the Army Chorus," and I said, "Yeah," and he said, "When I was in junior high school, there was a quartet that came out to my high school and sang for us at a men's chorus day." And Jason probably remembers the job. He and Michael Ford and Nathan Summers and I think all did that job. But that just happened a couple of weeks ago. And then I had a senior in high school tell me that he remembered the chorus coming to perform at a junior high school when he was a student, just maybe 5-6 years ago. So yeah, that does happen. But that brings me to the final question. And you guys have touched on it. I mean, a big part of it is family. A big part of it is helping parents find the tools and find the inspiration to encourage their young men to sing. And I do think a lot of it is within the educational system as well. And George touched on that. I think a few of you touched on that. That getting into the schools and encouraging young men to get involved in the choral programs that exist, or in a cappella groups, or whatever it is, musical theater. That's one step, but then there's also the step within the administration. Some of the programs, for example, it's really disheartening to me that the Thomas Jefferson School of Science and Technology here in Fairfax County, they've got their student body so overprogrammed that there's no room in the school day, in the curriculum, for a chorus. So they're down to, and they used to have one of the finest choral programs in the county, but they're down to just a handful of students that are meeting before and or after school to have a choral program. And when I say a handful, I mean maybe 5 or 6 students. So the convincing administrations in schools that more needs to be done. Oh, Amy's telling me that they only have a chorus club at Thomas Jefferson High School now. I wasn't aware of that. But that, and Amy could probably speak a lot more to the challenges that teachers face within the school systems right now. And there is peer pressure.
Is there a reason, maybe I missed it, that the schools are not having a choir or some kind of singing as part of the curriculum? I'm sure the bands still exist.
May I respond to that? Oh, starting maybe about 10, 15 years ago, the music programs began to be de-emphasized because music is, I think it suffers from the Muzak disease. It's ubiquitous. Everywhere we go, we hear music in the elevator and so forth. The people have sort of taken it for granted, you know, and it is seen now as more of a frill than a necessity. The medieval university included music in the quadrivium: math, geometry, um, science, and music, because music was considered a science. At one point, music was considered a prerequisite for the study of philosophy. So that respect for music has been washed away by modern society, technology. If the old scholars respected music as a science, along with astronomy, geometry, what did they understand about life that we don't? We are supposed to have been making progress, but when it comes to music, and it's gone the opposite direction. So until we can make people understand that music is more than just la da 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 da, it trains pathways in the mind, in the brain. Uh, what would you say is the most famous or the musical entity at the University of Michigan? Marching band, right? You see it during normal football seasons. That band is about 325 or more students strong. At no time, in no season, are there more than, say, 4, maybe to 6% at the most of music students in that band. Where do the rest of them come from? From every other school on campus. The sciences, medicine, engineering, business, you name it. A number of years ago, there was a young woman who was interviewed by the school paper. She was majoring in something like neurology or what have you, neuroscience. And she was asked, you know, you're out here playing your instrument, rehearsing, when you could be hitting the books. Well, why are you doing this? She said, because it's humanizing. So we have to get to a point, I think, where, and I don't know if that's possible, where the way we look in this society at music today as a frill, just begin to see it as a necessity and come back to it as a necessity for growing the brain, the mind, growing a sense of compassion and working together in harmony. But that's the problem. That's the reason why music programs have been axed at the place where they need to be the strongest. And that's like deracinating, pulling the tree up at the roots when you take music away from the elementary grades. But that's the problem. And it's a hard sell.
It is a hard sell. It's a really hard sell, and I sometimes feel helpless myself, and that is one of the things that really motivated me to do a lot of the educational outreach that we did when I was a member of the chorus, and Jason was a very big part of that.
I wanted to do more recruiting myself, but you were speaking about minorities
Mm-hmm.
being a part of the, and I remember going down to Morehouse and talking to those young men. I actually brought in a few people myself, Will Johnson, Andre McCrae, I had this discussion with him in Japan years before he came in, and he never forgot it. He never
Yeah.
forgot it. And so I wanted to be more instrumental. I was not officially, uh, doing that in an official capacity, but I wanted to do my part.
Any other thoughts about what we can do to encourage young men to sing? Not just young men, really. I hope that this conversation has an appeal not just to elementary, middle school, high school, but or college even, but also to church choirs, to community choruses. I really hope that we can offer some insight and some motivation for people to encourage men to sing.
I would take
I
a second. Oh, go ahead, Alvi.
No. Go ahead. I've said enough.
I was just going to take a second to highlight, going back to Kerry, when you started each of us as we were telling our stories about how, we got in not just to the chorus, but got into music, and our backgrounds there. I think every single person said to a T was someone connected me to this. We all found our connection through somebody who brought us along. And I think part of encouraging more men to sing and more people to sing in general is being the person that was there for you. For me, it was my group of female friends in high school that encouraged me to sing, having after, not sung for a really long time. And the guys in the chorus who came and said, hey, you should come audition for this group and hear this group and do that. And, now that I'm here, being one of the people that's going back to the outside saying, hey, you should come sing for this group. It's turning yourself into the person that opened the door for you is opening the door for others. I think that's a large part of it.
Given what the chorus is about, I remember when I auditioned, I had this reading music session with with the three that formed a quartet. We'd be given something that afternoon. The ink was still wet. We would rehearse it, and then we would perform it that night. So, looking at the present generations who don't have, again, the training to build the musicianship, it can be difficult to keep that standard alive, to keep it healthy, unless young men and young women are being given the training that they need to be musically literate. You look at a lot of the shows, America's Got Talent and so forth. It makes you wonder how many of these young people actually are musically literate. They have wonderful ears. They can probably hear something quickly and then learn if they listen to the recording and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to taking a piece of written music and being able to read it just like that, for an organization like the United States Army Chorus and other professional choruses, the ability to just pick it up like that's not going to make it. So it has to come back again to convincing people of the power of music to train and grow the brain, the pathways, so that the quality, the things that people learn through performance have use elsewhere. The number of executives of large companies who have had musical training, who have degrees in music, it's amazing. They haven't become professional musicians, but music is still a part of their lives, and they've learned to think in certain ways that has prepared them to be successful in business. So music is not a frill. It is a language that we started with when we were babies, and it's a language that needs to be respected and not tossed under the bus.
And on that note, I think that's a great way to wrap up the night. Again, I can't thank you all enough for being a part of the conversation. We've been talking for about 2 hours. So
Yes, I'd like to go and have my dinner.
Yeah, I think we all should. And I didn't even sip on my wine while I got so engrossed in the conversation. This has been wonderful. And again, this is just one of many roundtables that I hope to host. And if you guys have other thoughts that you want to share with me privately, please feel free. If you want to participate in any future roundtables, please let me know, because I'd love to have your company again. I'm going to close this out with one more recording that Major Tovin shared with me that's a little on the lighthearted side. And if you guys want to hang around, great. If not, if you need to get going, I totally understand. But thanks again for joining us.
They say that in the army the chow is mighty fine. A chicken jumped off the table and started marking time. A chicken jumped off the table and started marking time. Oh Lord, I wanna go. Oh Lord, I wanna go. But they won't let me go. But they won't let me go. Hey! Yep, Army life is something else. Let's start with the food. They say that in the Army, the biscuits aren't so fine. One rolled off the table and killed a friend of mine. Oh, I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home.
Hey, I got another one for you. They say that in the Army, the coffee's mighty fine. It's good for cuts and bruises and tastes like iodine. Oh, I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home.
Hey, speaking of breakfast, they say that in the Army, the pancakes are so fine.
Now you can try and chew 'em, but you're only wasting time.
Oh, I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home.
They say that in the Army, the meat is mighty fine. Last night we had 10 puppies, this morning only 9.
Oh, I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. We haven't even left the chow hall yet.
You wanna talk about pay and benefits?
Tell 'em, guys!
They say that in the Army, the pay is mighty fine. They give you $100 and take back 99. Oh Lord, I wanna go, but they won't let me go. And they say that in the Army, the mail is so great. Today I got a letter dated 1948. Oh Lord, I wanna go, but they won't let me go. Hey!
Let me tell you about my first field training exercise. They say that in the Army, the tents are waterproof. You'll wake up in the morning and you're floating on the roof. I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home.
My recruiter proudly told me that I'd look great in green. He skipped over the part that I'd be cleaning the latrine. I don't want no more of Army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home.
I wanna go home. say that in the army the beds are mighty fine, but how the heck would I know? I've never slept in mine. Oh, I don't want no more of army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. Oh, I don't want no more of army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. I don't want no more of army life. Gee, Ma, I wanna go, but they won't let me go. Gee, Ma, I wanna go home. We really mean it. Gee, Ma, I wanna
Oh, too much fun.
And on that note,
That was good.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it. Great to see you all.
Yeah, good. Fabulous.
Very
thanks,
nice.
Kerry.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Hey, Kerry.